Have you ever felt someone watching you, even when you were alone? Maybe it was during a quiet moment. A song started playing at just the right time. A feather floated down onto your path. Or you smelled your grandmother's perfume out of nowhere, and for a split second you wondered, was that them? If you've lost someone you love, then you know this question intimately. Do they still see you? Do they know what's happening in your life? Do the dead watch the living? It's a haunting question, not in the way horror stories suggest, but in a soft, aching way. Because deep down, you want to believe they're still with you, that your love didn't just vanish into silence. And here's the truth. What we call death is not a disappearance. It's a transition, a crossing over into another state of being, one that vibrates just beyond the threshold of our physical senses. You're living in a dense, material frequency, but not all of reality exists at this level. According to mystics, mediums, and even some physicists, consciousness doesn't require a body. It transcends it. It's like radio waves. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean the signal isn't there. Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, spoke of this vibrational truth. In his trance readings, he described how souls enter a higher realm after death. Not a place in the clouds, but a frequency, a vibrational dimension. And in that space, he said, the soul retains awareness, especially where love still lingers. They don't hover, spying on your every move. That's not how it works. But when you think of them, when you ache for them, when your heart breaks open in grief or joy, something happens. Like a tuning fork vibrating in resonance, your energy reaches theirs, and in that moment you become visible to them. Think of it like this. You're living in a world of static and sound, but love, pure love, cuts through the noise. It sharpens the signal. It calls across dimensions. That's why so many people report moments that feel more than coincidence. Dreams so vivid they feel like visitations. A song on the radio that hits you with their presence. Lights flickering. Birds showing up at the exact moment you were thinking of them. Some call it wishful thinking, but are you sure? Because across cultures and centuries, the belief that the dead stay near the living has never faded. In ancient Egypt, they believed the soul had many parts, including the Ka, the life force, and the Ba, the personality. After death, the Ba could move between realms, even visiting loved ones. That's why they left food, clothes, and messages in tombs, not as superstition, but as sacred communication. In China, ancestral altars still burn incense for the departed. In Tibet, monks read the Bardo Tado, the Book of the Dead, aloud to guide souls through the stages after death. And the Maori of New Zealand speak of the Werua, the spiritual essence that watches and guides its descendants. Even in Islamic teachings, the soul enters a state called barzakh, a liminal realm. The soul, they say, retains awareness. It hears the prayers of the living. It recognizes acts of charity done in its name. What do all these traditions have in common? They teach that the bond between souls isn't severed by death. It's transformed. Modern science is starting to catch up. Near-death experiences, those strange journeys beyond the body, have been documented across the globe. Doctors like Pim van Lommel, a cardiologist, and Raymond Moody, who coined the term NDE, have interviewed thousands of people who flatlined, only to return with stories of awareness, light, and overwhelming love. They described being out of their bodies, seeing family members waiting for them. Some even report knowing what was happening to their loved ones back on Earth during that time. And here's something worth pondering. If consciousness was merely a product of the brain, how could a person have awareness when their brain had shut down? Physicists like David Bohm have spoken about the implicate order, a hidden layer of reality where everything is connected beyond time and space. Quantum entanglement shows us that two particles, once linked, remain connected regardless of distance. If that's true on a physical level, then what does that say about your connection to someone you've loved deeply? someone whose heartbeat once synced with yours? Could it be that your bond still echoes in the field of consciousness? Many people who've experienced profound loss begin noticing synchronicities, events that seem orchestrated, timed with emotional precision. You see their birthday on the clock again and again. You hear their name whispered in your dreams, or you feel a sudden unmistakable warmth when you speak their name aloud. You're not imagining it. You're attuning. You see, your grief has a vibration. It's not just sorrow. It's love looking for somewhere to go. And when you feel them, when you sense them, when you dream of them, it may be more than memory. It may be that they've come close. But it's not like watching a movie. They're not sitting on a cosmic couch, tuned into every second of your life. Their awareness isn't bound by linear time or mundane moments, but in the big moments, births, deaths, heartbreaks, breakthroughs. That's when you're likely to feel them. Those are the moments when your frequency shifts, when your heart opens wide enough for spirit to step in. And sometimes they do. You might be wondering, if this is true, then why don't they just talk to you? Why don't they show up clearly, like they used to? Because where they are now, communication is different. Words are slow, matter is heavy, they move in symbols, in signs, in sensations. They speak in the language of intuition. So when you suddenly feel like someone's standing behind you, or you get chills with no reason, or a scent from your childhood floats through the air, pause. Don't brush it off. That may be them, not haunting you, but holding you, not watching with eyes, but witnessing with presence, because death is not absence, it's presence, without form. And if you can believe that, even a little, then you'll start to live differently. You'll stop fearing that they're gone, and you'll start realizing they're still here. They're still here, not hovering, not trapped, not lost, but moving through a different rhythm, a softer current of reality that runs just beneath this one. You might not hear them with your ears, but your soul knows. It recognizes their presence like a familiar hum in the background of your being. That hum often grows louder during moments of silence, during grief, during joy, during change. When your emotions crack open the ordinary, that's when the veil thins, that's when they reach through, and sometimes that's when you finally listen. People all over the world describe dreams that feel more real than waking life. In those dreams, their loved one doesn't just appear, they visit. There's a difference, and you know it when it happens. The dream feels bright, vivid, slow. Their eyes sparkle like they're seeing you for the first time again. They say something simple, something direct, something your soul needed to hear. And then you wake up, and instead of grief, there's a strange kind of peace. As if something has been completed. As if a door was opened just long enough to say, I'm still with you. You are not alone. These moments don't come randomly. They come through resonance, through love, through attention. In the unseen world, attention is power. Just as your attention can build thoughts and ideas in your waking life, your attention can also bridge the gap between worlds. When you speak their name with reverence, when you light a candle in their honor, when you cry with your heart open, you are not performing a ritual for the dead. You are opening a portal between hearts. Because in truth, there is no real separation, only a shift in awareness. And when that awareness deepens, you begin to sense that they don't just visit you out of curiosity. They come when it matters. They come when your soul is calling out for them. Not because they're watching every mundane moment, but because your bond still vibrates across time and space. And in the energetic universe, resonance matters more than physical location. When someone dies, their body dissolves, but their essence, their consciousness, does not. According to quantum theory, particles don't disappear. They simply exist in another form. Wave becomes particle, particle becomes wave, Form becomes essence, and essence is never truly lost. Physicists like Bohm spoke of an implicate order, a deep, underlying structure to the universe where everything is enfolded within everything else. What if that implicate order is the very field your loved one now dwells in, not gone, not separate, but enfolded into the great unity of all consciousness? That field? It's not silent. It pulses with presence. You can feel it when you're still, when you surrender, when you soften enough to remember that your mind isn't the only tool you have. Your heart is a receiver. Your spirit is an antenna. Your body, despite its density, is deeply intuitive. So the next time you feel that presence, don't dismiss it. Welcome it, because you're not imagining things, you're remembering things. You're remembering that love does not obey the laws of death. Love, at its core, is a vibration, and like all vibrations, it travels, it echoes, it finds a way. That's why even years after a passing, you can suddenly be hit with their voice in your head, or a memory that feels too vivid to be accidental, or a warmth in your chest so sudden it makes you pause. It's them. It's you. It's the invisible thread between. And yes, sometimes it's hard, because you want more. You want the hug, you want the conversation, you want them back in form. But they're not here to haunt you. They're here to remind you, you are eternal too. And just as they reached back across the veil to you one day, you'll do the same. When your time comes to cross, you'll remember that death is not the end, it's a soft unfolding, a return, a reuniting with those who have been patiently waiting. Watching not with eyes, but with heart, with soul. Until then, the connection remains, subtle but real. And if you begin to live with that awareness, everything changes. You stop fearing the unknown. You stop rushing through life as if it's a race. You begin to honor the invisible moments, the quiet seconds where presence speaks louder than words. And most of all, you start listening, not just to signs and symbols, but to the deeper pulse within you, the part of you that has always known this truth, even if you couldn't explain it. You see, your spirit was born fluent in this language, long before you had words, long before your beliefs were shaped. You knew. As a child, when you sensed something in the room, or spoke to someone others couldn't see, you weren't hallucinating. You were open, and over time, life made you close. Pain made you doubt. Logic made you forget. But now, you're remembering. You're remembering that death is not an end, it's an invitation to live more fully, to love more freely, to trust more deeply. Because the ones you've lost, they're not lost. They're just living from the other side of the veil. They watch with compassion. They guide without interference. They love you without condition. And every so often, they whisper your name, not to remind you of the past, but to pull you toward the future, to a version of yourself that lives without fear, a self that understands that nothing true can ever be taken, a self that remembers. You are never truly alone. You are never truly alone. And the more you open to that truth, the more you begin to see life itself as something sacred, not because it's fleeting, but because it's connected to something far greater than what meets the eye. When you start living with the awareness that those you've loved may still be near, not as ghosts, not as shadows, but as consciousness, everything softens. The bitterness of loss transforms into reverence. Grief no longer becomes something to run from, but a holy reminder that you dared to love deeply, and that love is never wasted. Grief is a language. It's how your soul calls across dimensions. It vibrates through every thought, every tear, every memory. And sometimes that call is answered. But the answer doesn't always come the way you want it to. It won't be a knock at the door or a voice in the hallway. More often, it will come as a shift in your awareness, a sudden clarity, a peaceful stillness, a knowing you can't explain. That's when you know. That's when you feel it. They're here, not watching every move, not lingering constantly, but showing up when it matters. Like how a mother wakes instinctively when her child cries in the night. Souls attuned to love respond to emotional resonance. This is why so many people report that their departed loved ones appear during important life events, weddings, births, graduations, moments of crisis, and even choices made at a crossroads. Not to interfere, but to encourage. Not to control, but to hold space. Because they still care. And that care transcends the laws of physics. It exists in the energy field between two hearts that once beat together in the same room, and still beat in time across realms. When people say energy never dies, they're not just talking about science. They're speaking to a deeper truth. Your connection to the ones you've lost isn't a memory. It's an energy signature. And energy by its very nature cannot be destroyed. It changes, yes. It shifts forms, but it remains. And if you can quiet the world around you, even for a moment, you can feel it. Like a warm breeze that carries a scent you haven't smelled in years. Like a photograph falling out of a book just when you needed to see their face. Like a sudden feeling in your gut that helps you make a decision you couldn't explain. That's not coincidence, that's connection. But here is the part that most people forget. You can reach out too. You don't have to wait for them to show up. You don't have to sit in silence hoping for a sign. You can create the space. You can speak to them. You can write them letters, light candles, create rituals, not because they need it, but because you do. Because it allows your energy to align with theirs. It's like tuning a radio. If you want to hear the music, you have to turn the dial. You have to meet them in the frequency where they now exist, and that frequency is love. Love without agenda, love without fear. Love without expectation. When you move into that space, something opens. The veil becomes thinner. And in that opening, you remember that the dead are not silent. They just speak a different language now. It's a language of symbols, of dreams, of intuitive nudges, of synchronicities so precise they defy logic. You see their favorite bird the day you need it most. You get a message from a stranger with their name. A flickering light when you speak their name aloud. These are not tricks of the mind. They're reminders that consciousness is not limited to flesh and bone. And neither are you. You're not just a body grieving another body. You are a soul calling out to another soul, and that call does not go unheard. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, you might feel a weight on the bed. A presence in the room, a sense of comfort so deep it brings you to tears. And in that moment, you know, you were seen, you were heard, and you were never forgotten. Because they remember you, too. They remember your laugh, your dreams, your struggles, your victories. They remember who you were and who you are becoming. And in their realm, where time flows differently, they see your evolution not as a sequence, but as a vibration. And when your vibration shifts, when you rise through healing, through gratitude, through presence, it's like sending a ripple through the cosmos. And they feel it. They may not intervene in your daily life, they may not rescue you from every hardship, but they walk beside you, sometimes guiding, sometimes holding space, always loving. It's subtle, but it's real, and if you live with that awareness, everything changes. You begin to treat life with more reverence. You begin to see your relationships as sacred contracts. You begin to speak with more love, move with more intention, forgive with more softness. Because if the dead can still see you, if they can feel your energy, then how do you want to live? What do you want them to witness? Do you want to live buried in grief, repeating patterns of pain? Or do you want to live in a way that honors them? Do you want to become the person they saw in you when they were alive? Because in their world, time is not linear. In their world, healing is not just personal, it's ancestral. When you heal forward, and you heal backward. You liberate them too. You free them from the weight of your suffering, because love is a bridge, and you are both standing on opposite sides, reaching across with your hearts wide open. And every act of courage you take in their honor becomes a signal in the sky. Every time you choose peace over bitterness, they see it. Every time you laugh again, they smile. Every time you whisper, "I miss you," with love instead of despair, they feel it. They are not in some faraway heaven cut off from your world. They are here, just beyond the veil, just beyond the noise, just waiting for you to remember, just waiting for you to remember, not with your mind but with your being. With the part of you that existed before words, before logic, before doubt. That ancient part that still knows how to feel the unseen, how to listen with your soul. And here's the beautiful part. Remembering isn't about effort. It's about allowing. Allowing the stillness to speak. Allowing the memories to flow without resistance. Allowing the possibility that your reality is not limited to what you can touch or measure. Because the deeper truth is, the most important things in life have always been invisible. You can't see love, but you feel it. You can't see time, but you're shaped by it. You can't see thought, but it creates your entire experience. So why do we demand visible proof to believe in the continued presence of those we love? What if the very demand for evidence closes the door to the experience? What if the reason you haven't felt them lately is because you've been looking in the wrong places? You see, they don't dwell in the noise. They're not found in endless scrolling, constant distraction, or looping mental anguish. They live in the stillness, in the breath, in the ritual, in the quiet acts of love you carry forward. When you cook their favorite meal, even when no one is watching. When you tell their stories to someone new. When you play that one song and cry because it still means everything. That's when they come close. That's when they lean in. And while they may not watch every single moment of your life, they remain attuned to your emotional frequency, to the sacred moments, the thresholds, the turning points, the times when you stand on the edge of change, when your soul trembles with the weight of choice. Because in those moments your energy shifts, and when it shifts it resonates, and when it resonates it reaches them, and sometimes they answer. Not in thunderclaps or apparitions, but in soft confirmations. A number on a clock, a feather on the ground, a voice that rises in your heart with words that aren't quite your own. That's how they speak now. Through science, through synchronicity, through silence. Not because they've become vague or distant, but because they've become vast. The moment they crossed, they expanded. No longer bound to time, to location, to personality alone, they stepped into their essence. And that essence is far more than who they were in a single lifetime. And so are you. You are not just their child, their friend, their lover, their sibling. You are a soul who shared space and time with them for a reason. That bond existed long before birth and continues long after death. You didn't meet by chance. You collided at exactly the right moment in the cosmic dance, and that collision left an imprint neither of you can erase. So even as you walk through this life without their physical form beside you, part of them walks with you still. In your decisions, in your strength, in your healing. They become part of your intuition, part of your resilience, part of the inner voice that says, "You can do this, keep going," and if you listen closely, you'll hear it. Especially when you need it most, because guidance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And those whispers come from the ones who've known your heart since before time. The ones who've seen your struggle and your strength. The ones who now move through light and vibration and eternity. You don't have to fear reaching out. You don't need to know how it works. You don't even need to believe with certainty. All you need is the openness to feel, to allow, to surrender to the mystery. because the mystery is not your enemy, it's your doorway. And when you stop trying to force the door open with logic, it begins to open on its own. That's when you feel the presence behind you when no one is there. That's when you feel the sudden urge to look up at the stars and speak. That's when you begin to sense that your life has always been surrounded by more than you could see. And it has. Because the ones who've crossed over haven't left. They've just changed form. They've become light. They've become wind. They've become the shimmer on water and the echo in your laughter. They've become the energy you carry forward every time you choose love over fear. And here's something you may not have realized. They're proud of you. Yes, you. For surviving the grief. For waking up when everything inside you wanted to stay in bed. For laughing again even when it hurt. For becoming the version of yourself they always believed you could be. They see that, not because they're watching you like some divine surveillance camera, but because your soul radiates differently now. Your pain has refined your light. Your grief has carved out space for deeper compassion, for more wisdom, for more truth. And from their side they recognize that light because it mirrors theirs. So if you're wondering whether they know what you're going through, the answer is yes, not always in specifics, not in every moment, but in essence, in vibration, in the way your soul reaches out and in the way theirs reaches back. They may not be here to fix things or stop your pain, but they are here to walk with you as you rise, to walk with you as you become, because the journey didn't end when they took their last breath. It only changed. And every time you choose to live fully, they live through you. Every time you open your heart again, you open a portal for them to flow through. Every time you remember them with joy instead of despair, they draw near, not as memories, but as presence, as essence, as soul, still connected, still loving, still here. Sometimes, it's the smallest things that speak the loudest. A flickering light with no reason. A song that starts playing the moment you think of them. A number that follows you around for days. On clocks, receipts, license plates. You try to brush it off at first. Coincidence, right? But the more it happens, the harder it is to ignore. You start to wonder, is this really random, or is someone trying to reach me? These moments, the ones you can't quite explain, they're not accidents, they're echoes, imprints, gentle taps from the other side of the veil. They don't scream or demand attention. They don't need to, because when they happen, something inside you knows. You feel it in your gut, in your chest, in the way your breath catches just for a second. That's what we call synchronicity. The intersection of inner experience and outer reality, when your thoughts, your feelings, and your memories suddenly line up with the world around you in a way that defies logic. You were thinking of your mother, and suddenly her favorite bird lands in front of you. You ask for a sign, and moments later her name appears on the back of a passing truck. You wake from a dream that felt too vivid to be just imagination, and all day you can't shake the sense that she was truly there. These are not hallucinations. They are not wishful thinking. They are visitations, veiled in the language of symbol. Because in their realm, communication is subtle. It doesn't come through sound waves or speech. It comes through patterns, through dreams, through vibrations that bypass the mind and speak directly to your spirit. And dreams, they are the clearest channel of all. In the dream world, your defenses are down, your logic is asleep. The veil is thinner, the soul is more accessible. And for those on the other side, it's the perfect moment to come close. That's why so many people report meeting their deceased loved ones in dreams. Not in chaotic, disjointed storylines, but in serene, luminous encounters. In those dreams, the person often looks radiant, younger, glowing. They don't say much, just enough. A sentence, a nod, a silent gaze filled with meaning. You wake up in tears, but not from sadness, from something deeper, from recognition. from knowing in your bones that what just happened was real, not in a physical sense, but in a way that transcends anything this world could ever define. These are not ordinary dreams. They are archetypal encounters. The deceased often appear as messengers, guides, symbols of something greater. They show up not just to comfort you, but to awaken you, to remind you that you are more than flesh and memory, that they are more than gone. And while not every dream is a visitation, some are unmistakable. You know it by the clarity, the peace, the feeling that lingers for days, the kind of dream that shifts you, that leaves behind an invisible handprint on your life. So how can you tell the difference? Wishful thinking tends to feel frantic. It's loud. It carries the energy of longing, fear, and desperation. You may wake up confused, disoriented, or still grasping. True visitations, though, feel calm, complete. There is no grasping, only knowing. No fear, only stillness. The memory doesn't fade like a regular dream. It stays with you, not as a scene, but as a frequency. And that frequency matches the same one you feel when signs begin to show up in your waking life. You start to notice patterns, numbers, especially. Maybe it's their birthday. Maybe it's the time they passed. You see it over and over again. At first you laugh. But then it keeps happening, and then it shows up on the day you needed encouragement most, and suddenly it clicks. It's them. Or maybe it's animals, a certain bird, butterfly or dragonfly that shows up only when you think of them. It seems silly, until it happens at the funeral, then again on their birthday, then again when you finally made the decision they always encouraged you to make. You start realizing the signs are not random, they're woven, threaded through your experience with purpose and precision. Even electronics become messengers. Phones that ring and no one's there. TVs that switch on during a memory. Songs that shuffle into perfect timing. Devices that glitch or light up with no logical explanation. These disturbances aren't malfunctions. They're messages. A way for energy to interact with the physical, because love always finds a way. And when your attention opens, when you become willing to see or realize the signs have always been there, you were just too distracted, too skeptical, too afraid to believe. But now you're remembering how to listen, not just with your ears, but with your awareness. You're learning to read the world like a living dream, to see through the eyes of soul. And the more you lean into this way of seeing, the more the signs begin to flow, because the universe doesn't speak in paragraphs, it speaks in patterns. And once you learn that language, you begin to understand that there is no such thing as just coincidence. There are only connections, meaningful, precise, and divinely timed. And the more you honor them, the more you say thank you when they arrive, the more you light that candle, say that prayer, or follow that intuitive nudge, the stronger the channel becomes. It's like any relationship. It requires attention, presence, faith. The more you show up for it, the more it shows up for you. And in time you begin to trust what you feel. You stop doubting every goosebump, every tear, every knowing. You stop asking if it's real and start asking what it's trying to tell you. And in that moment, you become the bridge between here and there, between now and always, between what can be seen and what can only be felt. If you want to understand how the deceased reach you and how you reach them, you have to begin seeing the world not as solid matter, but as vibration. Everything around you, your body, your thoughts, your emotions, is made of energy vibrating at specific frequencies. Science tells us this. Spirituality confirms it. And when it comes to connecting across dimensions, vibration isn't just a factor. It's the key. You're like a tuning fork. Every feeling you hold, every state you embody sends out a signal. When you're angry or chaotic, your frequency is dense, heavy, slow. But when you're in a state of love, of stillness, of reverence, your frequency rises. It becomes light, clear, open. And that's when contact happens. Not contact like a knock on the wall or a ghost in the hallway, but an energetic alignment, a resonance. Because the ones who've crossed over aren't speaking through words anymore, they're speaking through energy, through frequency. And that means the more you elevate your own vibration, the easier it is to feel them, to perceive them, to receive from them. High-frequency states like love, gratitude, even sacred grief, they open portals. You've probably felt it. In the middle of a silent cry, suddenly you felt a presence, a warmth, a knowing. That wasn't just emotion, that was attunement. Grief, when it's pure, is sacred, because it's drenched in love. It's not just pain. It's the soul reaching across time and space, calling home what it cannot hold in the physical. And love is the highest frequency there is. That's why love always finds a way through the veil. It doesn't need technology. It doesn't need permission. It simply moves, like light through the dark. When you're in a high vibrational state, you become more receptive. Your intuitive senses sharpen. You begin to sense presences, receive impressions, know things you couldn't logically know. That's not fantasy, that's resonance. Ascended masters have been teaching this truth for centuries. Saint-Germain, the keeper of the violet flame, spoke of the power of spiritual alchemy. He taught that by transmuting lower emotions and thoughts into higher ones, you don't just heal, you ascend. And as you ascend in frequency, you enter realms where communication with higher beings, including transitioned souls, becomes possible. He didn't say you had to be perfect. He said you had to vibrate differently, choose differently, live from your essence, not your programming. Mediterranean Goddard spoke about imagination as the bridge to the divine, that what you imagine vividly with feeling and belief creates not only your outer reality but your access to inner worlds. He often described the law of assumption, which states that if you assume something is real, feel it as real and dwell in its frequency, it must manifest. What if that same law applies to connection with those who've passed? What if, assuming they are near, feeling their presence, and dwelling in that love, brings them closer? Because it's not about delusion, it's about frequency. You don't tune into a radio station by begging it to play your song. You turn the dial until you land on the right vibration. The spiritual world works the same way, and you are the dial. When you walk into a space with reverence, when you slow your breath and quiet your mind, when you enter gratitude, even in the midst of heartbreak, your vibration lifts, and as it lifts, it becomes more compatible with the subtle realms, with the places your loved ones now dwell. This is why practices like meditation, prayer, chanting, and breathwork are so powerful, not because they're rituals of belief, but because they tune your frequency. They create resonance. They allow your heart to open just enough for spirit to step in. You've probably had moments where you weren't even thinking about them, and suddenly you were overwhelmed with emotion, as if they stepped through the veil without warning. But it wasn't random. Your frequency shifted, you became receptive, and they felt that shift like a whisper on the wind. That's how they reach you, and the truth is, they're always looking for an opening, not to haunt you, not to cling to the physical world, but to reassure you, to remind you that life does not end at death, that consciousness doesn't dissolve, it expands. But they can't force their way in because the realm they now inhabit respects free will and vibrational laws. So the more you elevate through love, through intention, through spiritual practice, the more they can come close. That's why grief, as raw and painful as it is, can also become a spiritual practice. When you allow grief to soften you, not harden you, when you use it to open your heart rather than close it, it becomes a sacred offering, a frequency that says, I still love you. I'm still listening. I still remember. And in that signal, they hear you. And sometimes, they answer. They might not be able to speak as they once did, but they can send you impressions, feelings, dreams, sensations. They can align circumstances. They can help guide you to the right place at the right time. Not as puppeteers, but as gentle guardians. But only when you're open enough to receive it. So the question becomes, how can you keep yourself in that open state? It begins with awareness, with the decision to live intentionally, to clear your mind, not with force, but with devotion, to live your life as if it matters, because it does. And when you live that way, you don't just honor yourself, you honor them. You raise your frequency, and in doing so you make yourself more visible to those who now live in the higher octaves of existence. You don't have to be a mystic or a psychic, you just have to be present, willing, open, and loving. Because love is the frequency of their world, and every time you meet them in that place, the connection is restored. To truly grasp how the deceased may still be with you, guiding you, watching over the turning points of your life, you have to go beyond the idea that time flows in a straight line. Because it doesn't. Not for the soul. You were raised to think of time like a ticking clock. Past, present, future, one event after another, like beads on a string. But consciousness doesn't follow that order. Consciousness moves like a river. It expands in all directions. At the moment someone leaves their physical body, they're no longer tethered to time the way you are. For them, time opens, and that means the connection you share doesn't vanish into the past. It becomes part of a greater multidimensional experience, a landscape where every emotion, every moment of meaning, every deep stirring of your soul still echoes. The philosopher Immanuel Kant once proposed that time and space are not absolute realities, but frameworks your mind uses to interpret experience. Remove the framework, and what you call past and future dissolve into presence, into now. Now imagine this. What if your loved one, the one who's passed on, exists in a state of being where all of your life is accessible, not as a linear movie they watch scene by scene, but as a field of moments vibrating with different intensities? They don't observe your every step, every errand, every passing thought. But when something significant happens, when your soul lights up with joy or breaks open in sorrow, that's when their presence draws near. Think of it like light piercing through fog. The mundane fades into the background, but the luminous moments shine, and they see the glow. When you fall in love again, they're there. When you stand at the edge of a new beginning, they're there. When you collapse in grief, whispering their name into your pillow, they're there. Not because they're watching you constantly, but because emotional energy is like a beacon. It radiates, it pulses, it cuts through dimensions. And the deeper the love, the brighter the pulse. That's why you may feel them most not in routine, but in moments of transition, when something begins, when something ends, when you're most alive or most vulnerable. In those moments, you remember them and they remember you. And maybe it's not memory at all. Maybe it's communion. Maybe those moments of déjà vu, of inner knowing, of sudden peace are their way of letting you know, I see you. I feel this with you. I'm walking beside you. Because the soul doesn't die. And the connection between souls isn't bound by calendars or clocks. It exists in a field of consciousness, a field that some spiritual teachers call the Akasha, or the divine matrix. In this field, everything you've ever felt, every bond you've ever formed, continues to exist, not as a static record, but as a living energy. And when the deceased enter that field fully, beyond the body, beyond time, they gain access to a broader view of your journey. But they don't use it to judge. They don't hover with disapproval. They witness, not the daily details, but the turning points of your soul, the moments you could have given up, but didn't, the times you chose love over bitterness, the healing you created for your family without even realizing it. They see those things because those are the moments that matter in the soul's evolution. And in the higher planes, evolution is everything. You may be asking, why don't they interfere more? Why don't they help with the small things? But they're not here to live your life for you. They're here to accompany your becoming, and your becoming is sacred. In their expanded state, they understand that your challenges are catalysts, that your pain has purpose, that even your losses are woven into something bigger, something eternal. They don't want to spare you from experience. They want to see you become who you were always meant to be, and they know you will, because they can see your potential the way you sometimes forget to. From their view, your story is not broken, it's unfolding, and each chapter brings you closer to your truth. You may not realize it, but you've probably felt the effect of their presence during your pivotal moments. A sudden inner strength. A choice you made with clarity you didn't know you had. A peace that arrived for no reason at all. That wasn't coincidence. That was consciousness beyond time reaching into your now. Because that's what love does. It transcends space. It rearranges time. It walks through veils. And the soul remembers everything. Not just what happened, but what it meant. And that meaning lives on. When you speak their name with reverence, you activate that field. When you remember them not with despair, but with purpose, you keep the connection alive. And when you live as if they're still with you, not haunting but holding, you rise to meet the part of yourself they always believed in. That's the gift of seeing consciousness as multidimensional. It frees you from the illusion of separation. You're not behind them, you're not ahead of them, you're side by side. Always connected through the thread of awareness. They are not watching from above in the way we think of watching. They are witnessing through resonance. Your love is their doorway. Your presence is their invitation. And the more you tune into that truth, the more you'll realize they haven't missed a thing. Not the things you thought were too small to matter. Not the tears you cried when no one was around. Not the day you whispered, "I hope you're proud of me." They were there, they felt it, and they are. So deeply proud of the person you're becoming. Because in the dimension where they now dwell, time does not define love, and love does not die. Not everything is meant to be stopped. Not every struggle is meant to be avoided. And not every prayer is meant to be answered in the way you expect. Because the purpose of their presence isn't to protect you from your life. It's to walk with you as you evolve through it. Your ancestors, your departed loved ones, the ones who once held your hand in this world, they aren't hovering to control your choices or to shield you from every hardship. They are holding space for your soul to grow. That's real love. And love, when it's pure, does not micromanage. They won't stop every heartbreak, they won't reroute every failure, but they will appear when it truly matters, when your spirit is at a crossroads, when your life is about to change, when something in you is rising that could alter the course of your evolution. That's when they intervene. And when they do, it's subtle, but unmistakable. Maybe it's the strong inner knowing not to take that job, even though it looked perfect on paper. Maybe it's the urge to turn around just before a car speeds through the intersection. Or maybe it's a dream so vivid, so urgent, that you wake up and change something. And that change ends up saving you. These aren't fantasies. These are the quiet ways they guide you. Not because you're broken, but because you're becoming. There's a difference between interference and intercession. Interference would take away your power, but intercession empowers your path. And that's what they do now. They don't make your life easy, they help make it meaningful. Because evolution requires pressure. It requires choice, and every challenge you face shapes your energy, your character, your soul's signature. They know that. They've already walked that path, and now they're watching yours unfold, not with worry, but with wisdom. Many people who've gone through near-death experiences or moments of great danger speak of a presence, a force that nudged them, held them, pulled them back from the brink. Some call it intuition, some call it spirit guides. Some say, "I knew it was my father," or I heard my mother's voice just for a second telling me to stop. And what if they were right? What if those voices, those nudges, those life-saving instincts are the precise way that our departed loved ones guide us, not through control, but through alignment? Their protection doesn't always look like prevention. Sometimes it looks like strength. Sometimes it looks like the unexpected delay that saved your life, the cancelled flight that kept you safe, the gut feeling that redirected you. The voice in your heart that whispered, "You're not alone." These are not illusions. These are the fingerprints of the invisible, quiet forms of divine protection offered without expectation. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be open. Open to the idea that guidance isn't always loud, that protection doesn't always look like armor, that sometimes being watched over means being given the space to rise, even if it hurts. Because real protection doesn't shield you from growth, it supports you through it. And your ancestors, especially, understand this better than anyone. They've passed through the fire of their own lives. They've carried burdens, dreams, lessons, many of which now live inside of you. You are their continuation, their legacy in motion, and that's why they're invested in your evolution, not your comfort, your becoming. In many spiritual traditions, ancestors are not just remembered, they are revered, not just for who they were, but for who they've become beyond the veil, wise, expanded, able to see beyond the physical. They become guides. Not in the Hollywood sense, not floating spirits pointing down the right road, but in the energetic sense. They become part of the current that flows through your intuition. They become part of the knowing that can't be explained. They show up in your dreams, in your prayers, in the words of strangers who say exactly what you needed to hear. They appear because the doorway between your heart and theirs never closed. It just changed shape. And when that doorway is activated, by crisis, by choice, by longing, their presence returns. You might not always feel it, but when you do, it can be life-altering. There are stories, countless ones, of people standing on the edge of despair, only to be pulled back by something they couldn't see. A woman who was about to give up hears her grandmother's voice say, "Not yet." A man who lost everything dreams of his father giving him a map, and the next morning he takes a new path that leads to healing. A child finds a letter from a parent long gone, tucked inside a book they almost didn't open. These are not accidents. They are orchestrations. Not in the sense of fate, but in the sense of alignment. Moments where love reaches across dimensions to guide without forcing, to protect without preventing, to lead without dominating. That is the power of evolved love. And when you start to live with this awareness, you change. You begin to recognize the difference between fear and guidance. You begin to feel when something is an echo of your wounds and when it's a whisper from the other side. And more importantly, you begin to trust. You trust that even when things fall apart, you're being held. You trust that when you're unsure, you'll be shown. You trust that the ones you've loved and lost have not left you. They've just stepped into a role that's more powerful than ever before. They're not just watching over you. They're walking with you. Not in form, in frequency. Not as saviors, but as sacred witnesses to your unfolding. Grief is not the enemy. It's not something you have to escape, numb, or silence. It's not a weakness. It's not a flaw in your healing. Grief is the evidence of love. It's the echo of what mattered most, the proof that someone touched your soul in a way that no ending could erase. And when you face it, not as a wound to be fixed, but as a sacred threshold, something extraordinary happens. Grief becomes a doorway to connection, because underneath the ache, grief is full of presence, full of memory, full of vibration. It is love reshaped by loss, calling out to the part of you that still remembers what's real. And the more you stop resisting it, the more you surrender to what it's trying to reveal, the closer you come to the ones you miss. They live in your tears, in your remembering, in the way your chest tightens when their song plays or the smell of their cologne drifts in out of nowhere. That's not your mind playing tricks on you. That's your heart reaching out, and when your heart opens that wide, it becomes a channel, a bridge, an invitation. You see, grief lowers your defenses. It softens the walls of logic and habit and lets the mystery in. And it's in that softness, that rawness, that spiritual contact is most possible. Not when you're strong, not when you're distracted, but when you're real, when you're cracked open and willing to feel everything, even the pain. Because pain isn't the opposite of spiritual awareness, it's the beginning of it. Every mystic, every sage, every awakened soul has passed through the fire of grief, and on the other side, they found presence, stillness, connection. The quiet knowing that death didn't sever the bond, it simply reshaped the way it's expressed. So how do you work with your grief instead of fighting it? You start by honoring it. You stop apologizing for it. You stop rushing it. You stop treating it like an illness. And instead you give it shape, you give it voice. You write them letters, not because they need the words, but because you do. Because the act of putting pen to paper creates movement, energy that flows from your soul into the space between. You light candles on their birthday. You make their favorite meal. You whisper their name before you sleep. Not to dwell in the past, but to activate the present. Because those rituals, they anchor the connection. They say, I remember you. They say, you still matter here. They say, this love didn't end. It transformed. And in that acknowledgement, something shifts. You begin to feel them again. Not as a memory, but as a quiet presence. Maybe it shows up in your dreams. Maybe it shows up in your breath, a sudden stillness, a peace you can't explain. Maybe it shows up in the way the sunlight hits the table exactly like it did the day they passed. These are not small things. These are answers. And they come when you allow grief to be more than pain. When you let it become a spiritual teacher. Because grief, when met with awareness, has power. It brings your attention inward. It asks you to feel what you've avoided. To see what really matters. To drop the masks and be with what is. And what is beneath the pain is presence. It's your own soul waking up to the truth that life is not confined to a body, that love doesn't require physical proximity, that presence can exist beyond form. And when you really feel that, you realize you were never abandoned. You realize the ache in your chest isn't just longing, it's resonance. It's the vibration of connection that refuses to die. The mistake most people make is trying to get over grief. But you don't get over it. You get under it. You go into it. You let it shape you into someone softer, someone wiser, someone more attuned to the invisible. Because the ones you've lost aren't asking you to forget them. They're asking you to remember in a new way. They're asking you to evolve the connection, to stop searching for their footsteps in the hallway and start listening for their voice in your heart, to stop waiting for them to walk through the door and start walking through the world as someone changed by their love. Because grief in its highest form becomes transformation. It becomes a prayer, it becomes a ritual. Every breath you take in their memory is a sacred act. Every step you take toward your healing is a gift to them. And every time you allow grief to turn you inward, to wake you up, you become more available to their presence. You become more available to your own soul. And in that space, grief is no longer the end of the story. It becomes the beginning of a deeper conversation, one that doesn't rely on words, one that moves through silence, one that carries the truth. They are still with you, not trapped, not lost, not gone. With you, inside the silence, inside the stillness, inside the ache that led you to awakening. Because grief isn't something you carry alone. It's something that walks beside you, transforming you. And when you let it, It becomes the very path that leads you back to them, not as they were, but as they are now, as light, as presence, as love that refuses to let go. What if you lived as if you were still being watched, not by judgment, but by love, not with paranoia, not with fear of making a mistake, but with reverence. Reverence for this life. Reverence for the eyes that may no longer blink but still see with the heart. Reverence for those who once walked beside you and now walk just beyond the veil. Because when you understand that your departed loved ones are still present in the moments that matter most, something inside you changes. You start to live differently, not out of guilt, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you realize that you are not alone, that someone, somewhere beyond the visible, is bearing witness to your becoming. And being witnessed, truly witnessed, can be one of the most sacred things, because in this world we often feel invisible, misunderstood, forgotten. But what if you're not? What if the ones you've lost are still holding you in their awareness? Not constantly, but when your energy calls for it, when your light flickers just a little brighter or dimmer than usual. What if they see your resilience? What if they feel your sorrow? What if they cheer you on in ways you'll never fully understand? Wouldn't that change how you show up? Wouldn't that invite you to live not just for yourself, but as a continuation of all those who came before you? Because you are the living prayer of your ancestors. You are the breath of someone's memory made real. You are the decision they never got to make, the healing they never had the tools to begin, the love they gave, still unfolding in form. And if that's true, then your life is not just yours. It's part of something larger. It's part of a lineage of souls, each carrying the light forward, each burning through pain, each growing toward something more radiant. When you carry that awareness that you are being witnessed by love, you start asking deeper questions. Not, what do I want to do? But, who do I want to be? Not, what can I get away with? But, what do I want to be remembered for? Not, who's watching me from the outside? But, who's feeling me from the inside? Because when you feel seen by the ones who truly knew you, who knew your laugh, your soul, your shadows, you start showing up with more honesty, more compassion, more integrity. You don't want to waste time. You don't want to pretend. You don't want to live half asleep. You want to live a life that would make them smile, not because you're trying to live for them, but because you're living with them. Still, it's right now, and that changes everything. It changes how you speak, not with bitterness but with grace. It changes how you love, not with fear, but with presence. It changes how you face hardship, not with despair but with quiet strength that says, I'm not alone in this, because you're not. When you walk into the world with the sense that unseen eyes, kind eyes, knowing eyes, are watching, not to judge, but to witness, you begin to move more consciously. You make choices that honor your spirit, not just your ego. You pause before speaking words you might regret. You offer compassion, even when it's hard. You forgive, not just for your own healing, but because you know that letting go liberates those on both sides of the veil. You become a living altar, an expression of the love that still lives between you and the ones you thought you lost. And that awareness, that unseen companionship, becomes a compass, not in a controlling way, but in a sacred one. You feel guided to the right people. You feel prompted to take new paths. You start trusting your gut, because maybe, just maybe, it isn't just your gut. Maybe it's someone nudging you gently from beyond, not forcing, but suggesting, whispering, go here, try this. You're ready. This is what it means to live as if watched by love. It means reclaiming your purpose. It means remembering that your life is a bridge, not just between birth and death, but between dimensions, between generations, between what has been and what could still be. It means knowing that even your smallest acts, the kindness you offer, the dreams you follow, the courage you show, ripple across time and space. You may never see the full effect of your healing, but they do. They see it, they feel it, and every time you rise, they rise with you. Because that's the nature of love. It never works in isolation. It lifts all who are connected to it, whether living or departed. So live as if love is watching, because it is. Live as if your healing matters, because it does. Live as if this moment is sacred, because it is. Every breath you take, every tear you shed, every step you choose toward growth over safety is a message sent across the veil. It says, I'm still here. It says, I still feel you. It says your love didn't die with your body. And when you live from that place of reverent awareness, of subtle connection, you don't just survive your grief, you transmute it. You take what was heavy and turn it into light. You take what was broken and turn it into wholeness. You take what was lost and you turn it into legacy. And in that, you find a kind of peace the world can't offer. A peace that comes from knowing that you are not alone. You never were, and you never will be. You never will be, because love, once created, never dies. It moves, it transforms, it expands, but it does not vanish. The ones you've loved and lost are not lost at all. They've become part of something bigger, part of your breath, your heartbeat, your intuition, your sudden moments of clarity, your unshakable sense that someone, somewhere still cares. And they do. They care enough to show up in silence. They care enough to answer without words. They care enough to witness your journey with reverence, not control. So the next time you feel that ache, that tug at your chest, that sudden wave of emotion, pause. It may not be sadness. It may be presence. He may be them, leaning in, whispering not from a place above, but from a place within, a space where there is no death, only change. No separation, only shift. No ending, only transformation. The veil between the worlds isn't some cold barrier. It's a soft curtain, one that thins every time you remember them, every time you love them, every time you speak their name out loud with reverence instead of despair. And when that veil thins, when your frequency lifts, when your heart becomes still enough to listen, that's when they come, not to haunt, but to hold, not to watch your mistakes, but to witness your awakening. And in those sacred moments you realize the truth. They never truly left. They're just watching from the side of eternity, with eyes made of love.